Before we continue into the movie, I just want to specify something that I don't think I've covered in the last couple of entries so far. I did mention that we are moving back into the podcast area, so if you are listening to this via podcast, thank you. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the content. I appreciate you. The original version of the podcast that was strictly audio is available right now. I don't believe I've actually said that. I've actually put it all back up. It's all back up and ready to listen to if you want to go back and look at any of the other stuff. Just in case I didn't bring that up, I just wanted to bring that up now. And let's keep moving forward with what this year's list of the horror movies that I haven't really gotten a chance to talk about yet. And this one is probably, I don't want to say one of the biggest one, but it's definitely one of the biggest one. I want to say this is like top 10 the last like couple of years when it comes to these movies that went around the horror community circles. There was just, everybody was talking about this movie, and I don't even believe it got a legitimate theater release. So it did a couple of indie film festivals. It did the South by Southwest, the Bluefinch, which I've never heard of, the Overlook, and then it had a DVD release. It was on video on demand. Yeah, I don't know if this thing ever had like a box office run, to be honest with you. It's got box office numbers of almost $2 million, so that's not bad. But for a film, it takes a lot for like the word of mouth for certain films to be the only thing that kind of pushes it forward for anybody to kind of give it any attention. Word of mouth films to me are some of they're the reason why the art form is not really dying, because you can't really, this is why people like me do what we do. You can't 100% always count on what a critic is going to say, because a critic is somebody who works for a company. We're independent people. I'm just a guy that likes watching movies. I have tried to give my best interpretation of things. I'm no, genius when it comes to a lot of film and television, but I do have a good, or at least a somewhat more heightened understanding of film, just because movies have been my passion for almost my entire life. So I'm very passionate about films, and that's why I like talking about them, to bring attention to films like what Oddity is. And Oddity to me feels like one of those things where if you were told about it and you did get a chance to see it, you were very fortunate, because it really was something that was, at the time, this was last summer, I want to say, at the time it was the movie floating around with everybody. It was the thing that everybody who is a giant horror fan was talking about. And it was for a few months that was the thing that everybody was talking about. And it was just part of it's really been huge in the horror community the last few years, because there's everybody just doing all these really unique things. And Oddity just does something. It does something so simple, but it takes it to another level, I would say. And that extra level is just what it really does with how it plays with darkness. And how it plays with darkness is just, it's so thought out that it almost feels like, why does it feel like it's the first film to sort of do it? And I know it's not the first film. Don't come at me in the comments. I know it's not the first film to sit here and make you afraid of what's in a dark corner, or when a door opens up and it's dark in there. I know it's not, but it feels like it because of how they were able to play with it. To play with darkness and have it be its own sort of, it's its own character, it's its own plot device in this film. It's done so well with every chance it gets to utilize those darker corners of this house it takes place in the middle of nowhere, that it feels like you're experiencing what horror kind of was supposed to be like, or maybe it was like when you were even younger, when you're just experiencing your first horror movie in a way, when you're trying to just understand what you're meant to be scared of, and discovering things that you are scared of, things that you're not scared of. And I want to say, like, there might be all these different phobias out there, but I feel like being afraid of the dark is something we all, at some point in our lives, have all kind of shared in some capacity, whether it's a dark alley or being out in the woods at night and it's just really dark out there, or a dark road or a dark building. At some point in your life, the darkness has made you uncomfortable, And this film kind of doesn't help that, but it does show you what can be done with that in a film. So now, what is Oddity? Oddity is a film. It comes out of Ireland. It's written and directed by Damien McCarthy, and he's only done one other film besides this. And this is actually a film I heard a lot of good things about too. He did a film called Caveat, which I believe is how it's pronounced. This is another film that I heard a tremendous amount of things for. There's only the second film that he's ever done. Yeah, see, this has got ratings up the wazoo, this film. So, between these two films, this guy, Damien McCarthy, he's done a tremendous job of making a name for himself in the horror world. And Oddity is just another film that kind of adds to that, being that it takes place in this semi-remote house that is owned by this newlywed couple. They're kind of renovating it. And it starts off with the wife going out there, and there's at least a 20, maybe 15, 20-minute segment of her just being out there by herself, camping in their house for the night because the husband works at a hospital and he has to do the overnight. And, of course, there's a lot of creepy stuff that happens. You get very uncomfortable, and it leads into her dying. And when she dies, it does a time jump where now the husband still lives there. He's moved on. He's with somebody else, and he had his I want to say wife, but it might have been fiance. His dead wife or fiance had a sister, and the sister happened to be blind and also clairvoyant. She is a psychic, and she deals with hauntings and haunted objects. So she owns this Ed and Lorraine Warren style like apothecary where she holds on to dangerous psychic items and does psychic readings and all of that. And she feels that there's something wrong with who she thought was the one that killed her sister, because what happened was, you don't discover it until later, but she starts questioning it even though they apparently knew who the killer was and he had already been arrested. So because of those questions, she goes to the house with a family heirloom. That's basically what the Oddity is. When you see the Oddity, when you look up the film and you see any poster that has the Oddity, that thing with the just giant agaped mouth, that's the Oddity. This is apparently some ritualistic statue that this family has had that they bring into the house to see and to be in the house with the ex I don't even know, brother-in-law, like the man who was married or engaged to her sister and his new fiance girlfriend. And she imposes herself to stay for the night while the husband goes away. And then, things also get a little creepy and the statue gets made and it's sitting there at the dining table for most of it. And she's freaked out. And again, there's just this really excellent play with darkness that every time it plays a role in a scene, it does something extra for that scene. And we're talking about something that's it's not a person, it's not an object, it's not AI, it's just dark. And utilizing dark, it's like, what I mean by utilizing dark is, have you ever seen Leon the Professional, when they have the very beginning where he starts killing off his target that makes sure that he's a hitman, and then he's just in the shadows, and he comes out from the shadows and puts the knife to the guy's neck and puts the phone, and the guy says, "Let him go," and he takes the knife off and he drifts back into the shadow, and then all of a sudden the guy turns around and the dark alley that he's in seems a little bit brighter. Like, that's what I'm talking about when I say using darkness. Film, if a director can use shadows or darkness in a way that kind of helps add a different level to what you're watching, to me it's just there's a tremendous feat of artistry to that. There's something about the cinematography that person, whoever that director is, they're able to see past what the things in their environment can do and understanding what they can do outside of themselves, and to step out of that, I feel like, is extremely talented. And that's what this movie kind of emphasized to me, is that there is a talent to not only just the writing but also the cinematography, because every time you get hit with something that just makes you uncomfortable, it's meant to do that, and it's not like it's on purpose. It doesn't feel like it's forced. It feels like this is the genuine progression of how this story should go, and if you're uncomfortable, that's exactly where it's supposed to be going. So the night progresses, a lot of things happen. I don't really want to ruin it for a lot of people, even though this film's already been out for a year. And if you're watching this just to see how I feel about it, you might have definitely seen it. But essentially, it goes really deep into spirits and the mystery of the actual murder and the hospital that the husband works for. That gets involved heavily when you didn't think it had much to do, except that it's the reason why he gets driven away from a lot of the story. You know, he's at the hospital, like just getting phone calls while everybody else is at the house, and the house is most of the focus. Then they bring the insane asylum, and it just adds this extra layer of everything to the husband's side of the story, I guess you can say. It's just an extremely like well made film. It's probably my favorite film of last year, or at least one of my favorite films from last year. And I just think that if you haven't gone out of your way to either try to find it or maybe you haven't seen it since then, you know, just Oddity is like the perfect film to do a rewatch with. You know, add that to your catalog of rewatches. I'm rewatching it this year. That's the whole reason I'm talking about it, is because it's going to be a film that's I'm going to rewatch every year because it's just that good, and it deserves to be in that bracket amongst any of those other films that you might put there.